Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all are doing well today. My name is Monty Sylvan, and I'm the coordinator here at AdvaMed for the membership department. Today, we have a wonderful presentation aligned for you in partnership with Sunrise Labs entitled Gaining Financial Commitments in Uncertain Times. Before we get started, I just want to do some small housekeeping. If you have any questions, please ask them in the Q&A section on Zoom and not in the chat. Um, we would just want to keep all the questions organized in one space. Questions will be held toward the end of the presentation. From there, I want to give it off to our moderator and host, Brian Gilpin, president of Sunrise Labs. Brian, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Monty. Can you hear me okay? Very good. Okay. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone out there who's listening in on this webinar. I'll just start by saying how excited I've been about this webinar and putting this together. This has been in the works for quite some time and couldn't be more appropriate for everything that all of us, all of you are seeing in the MedTech world. I can tell you between it'd be certainly for me in my career over the last 12 months, and probably for the next 12 months at least, I have never seen more uncertain times than what we're going through currently. And so I'm really pleased to put together this group of pioneers whom I all know individually and respect very much, who are all navigating in very different ways, but as you'll see, have some very common themes in terms of what they're going through and how they're getting it done. And you're also going to see three companies in very different stages of their development, everything from early stage through commercial stage. So really excited to have that for you. Before we dive in with the first questions, I'd be remiss if I didn't have a chance to introduce myself and Sunrise Labs. Again, Brian Gilpin, president of Sunrise Labs. And for those who don't know us, we're a consulting, innovation, and engineering firm that has been around for over 30 years. We partner with visionary medtech companies like the ones you see here to transform pioneering ideas into medical breakthroughs through deep-rooted engineering excellence, regulatory clarity, and a flexible approach built for collaboration. And on that last point, we're particularly proud in our ability to empower our clients to deliver what matters most to them through that collaboration. And then apropos to today's topic, we find that in highly uncertain times like today, that client and investors want more than innovation. They want the critical thinking and executional confidence so their products have a credible path to market. So we'll get into some more of that here in these discussions. And with that, I'll allow the panelists to introduce themselves also through the first question. And so maybe Denise, and welcome Bertrand and Ryan. If you don't mind, please tell us about yourself, your companies, and a little more about your recent financial raise and or your current financial raise and what you're going through with that. And Denise, we'll start with you, then move over to Ryan and then Bertrand.
Sounds good. Hello, everybody. Thank you for the warm welcome, Brian. I'm Denise Eilis. I'm the CEO of Cytrellis. Very pleased to be here today and share some of the experiences, but also the challenges we've experienced. A brief overview of who we are. We are a commercial stage company, and we've created a new category in the aesthetic medicine space. We are focused on advancing non-surgical skin removal and skin rejuvenation with our flagship technology called EllaCore with microcoring, which is first and only device cleared by the FDA to remove full thickness microcores of skin without the use of energy or heat or surgery, and that allows to tighten skin, rejuvenate skin, remove wrinkles without creating scars, and also offer an option for patients that don't want surgery. I came on board earlier this year as part of a full restructuring that Cytrellis was doing. And my focus has been on scalable, sustainable growth, because as I mentioned, we're commercial stage. I'm an engineer by training. I have a PhD in biomedical engineering, and therefore we're growing through innovation, but growing through clinical developments, but also by rethinking our commercial strategy. As we've been around for a while, we are actually in Series D. So when I came on board, part of that full restructuring included a financing round, which I will share more details, mostly led by existing investors, but it's a round focused on growth, on relaunching our technology after a lot of technical improvements have been made, and scaling globally as well. So different challenges than the ones that I'm sure Ryan and Bertrand will share, but challenging in itself as well. And yeah, that's a little bit about us. And thank you for having me again. And I look forward to the discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Denise. And Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm the CEO and co-founder of CranioSense. So we are a other end of the spectrum from Denise. We're a pre-revenue company. We have essentially developed a non-invasive device to replace invasive sensors for brain pressure assessment. So the only way to diagnose and to continuously monitor brain pressure today is to drill a hole in your head or a hole in your spine. We put instead a sticker on your forehead, and we can assess it in a matter of minutes, as opposed to patients that wait weeks, months, years to get diagnosed for certain conditions. Like I said, we're very early stage. We have clinical studies behind us and are now moving into product development, and so have just raised about 1.5 million and actually a couple grants from the U.S. government to move us from those clinical stages through product development and all the way through to market. So unique challenges there, but probably some relevant strings throughout both Denise and Bertrand's stories with ours as well. So thank you for having us.
Thank you, Ryan. Welcome, Bertrand.
Hello.
And how about you?
I'm Bertrand Duplat. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Roboté. We are pre-revenue also, just like Ryan. We are going for a moonshot. Roboté, we're developing a millimetric micro robot, very tiny robot that is going in the brain for a neurosurgical intervention. So it's a tiny robot that goes transcranially, and that is used in the hands of neurosurgeons to move in the brain parenchyma in curves, whereas every tool today that exists moves in a straight line, and the curves open new possibilities, new diagnostic and new therapeutic possibilities, mostly because you can go to hard to reach location, but also because you can go to multiple locations with just one burr hole, and that opens the way to a better understanding of the brain, therefore better treatment, personalized medicine. We just raised 30 million in January this year, and that gets us to the current phase all through the next one, basically the first in humans. So we're going to be able, with that amount, to start our first in humans, so our first trials on actual patients of the microbot. Then we'll raise again to go further to market.
Very nice. Thank you, Bertrand. And can you tell me some more? What were the biggest challenges? And I'll direct this to Ryan first. What were the biggest challenges you faced in securing funding over the past year? And it's particularly interesting since you also have government money as well. Tell us some more.
Yeah, no, I think each startup has some unique challenges, but I think, because of the market space and how everything's shifting a little bit later in terms of proof points and milestones that everybody wants to see, we had a unique challenge in just identifying, I think, initially who we were going to go raise from. And so put out a lot of feelers in terms of, angel investors, angel groups, early stage VC. And for us, it was aligning the message of, what we were selling for this round in terms of an investment and where we were going to get to with what was expected from those investors. And so for us, it was a lot of taking the planning that we did and then operationalizing it in terms of actually going out and seeing, what the appetite was for an early stage medtech company. I think like Bertrand, we're going for a moonshot in terms of, this is a completely new market. There's nothing out there for this right now. And so aligning kind of that messaging between look, this can change a lot for the lives of the patients that we can help millions of patients around the world each year. With then, hey, how are we going to execute on our de novo application, right? Those are two very different messages, and sometimes are hard to piece together in a coherent, 5-minute, presentation to an investor to keep them hooked, especially when you don't know who that investor is going to be. And so that was for us a big challenge, and it was just identifying, look, where do we fit in this new kind of stage of seed, pre-seed, Series A, and where do those investors live? So we navigated it, but it was certainly probably one of our biggest challenges throughout the process.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. And Denise, coming from the other side of the spectrum and being commercial stage, can you comment from your perspective on challenges that you faced and are facing?
Correct. And for us was interesting because the company is undergoing a full transformation, right? And I came on board about 6 months ago. We did a full restructuring. We reset valuation as well. And we're relaunching the product with a lot of improvements. So it's kind of that uncertainty. There's uncertainty in the market, but that uncertainty it's almost like starting from scratch, but already being commercial, right? So it was, how do I align that message? How do we make sure that it's clear, that story is clear? But we also faced some groups, especially the ones that had conversations with a company previously, that they were like, okay, we like the story, but we'll wait and see. Right? We'll wait and see until you can show us that it will actually work, that you will actually deliver. So some of the ways we navigated through that was we had really strong support from some of our existing investors, where they actually were putting in the vast majority of the investment in the round. And what we're still trying to do is how to complement them with a couple to create a stronger syndicate. But it was a story of, look, our existing investors trust and believe. So it's almost using that story to overcome those challenges, but also limited the type of investor we would reach to, because even though it's a Series D, we're not raising a huge amount. Like totally, it's about 25 million. And the big funds that invest in late stage commercial companies are not interested in those types of rounds, right? And the ones that invest 10 million, they probably want earlier stage companies. So it was aligning who is the right investor, the right story, and the credibility, because some of them were like, okay, fine, all sounds great. Come back in 2 quarters and show me that actually worked.
Right. And it's interesting. I think that wait and see kind of mentality we're seeing out there is going to resonate through all of you. And Denise, it's interesting from the commercial standpoint. So you had past investors to leverage.
Correct.
So I'd love to dive some more into that. But first, Bertrand, maybe I'll turn it over to you with the next question that plays into that. You're coming in a very different state. How did the uncertainty in the market, either macroeconomic or sector specific or anything else, change how you position the company to investors? And did you need to adapt along the way?
Of course, we needed to adapt, and I think that it's clear that every company is very specific, and it's very difficult to use generic information and even advice that is addressed to us, but coming from a completely different experience, So you need to adapt and to adjust. But I think really what's important, and I think it's been said already, is that you have to adapt the message also to the phase you're in. We had initially a phase where it was extremely R&D intensive. Nobody and no VC likes to invest in this. So we had to find business angels, different type of investor. And then once we had a first prototype, we get into more of a classical deep tech, I would say, startup, but still you're not, you're a bit too risky for large VCs, and you have to position yourself well. And then, after a few hurdles were passed, we were able to get the top VCs for the Series A, and that was amazing. But I think that you have to adapt, and you have to accept that it's non-linear. Like a great funnel helps, but at the end of the day, what's going to happen is that what happened to us is we met someone at a conference completely randomly, or maybe not so randomly because we were at this conference, and that person introduced us to somebody in our fund, and he made the term sheet, and that was it. Everything was triggered out of this. So everything, you have a funnel, you see that many investors, step by step. In the end, it's something else that triggers it. And I think that you have to accept the unpredictability, and that the day before you get the term sheet, you don't have much in your hands.
Yeah, I like to call those random collisions serendipity.
Exactly. Random collision serendipity. It's exactly that.
And Bertrand, thank you for that. And Ryan, what about you? In a kind of a similar earlier stage that you're in. So how did you deal with the high uncertainty, and did you have to adapt along the way?
Yeah, I know. I think, from a macro perspective, I think people are kind of holding a little bit in terms of, everybody said it already, the classic, like, oh, come back to me with the data. I mean, I think people are using that a bit more in terms of, an excuse to not deploy. But I think there's still conviction out there. It just needs to be built in a different way, right? Like what Bertrand was talking about, the conviction comes from learning, I think, more about the founders, the mission. Like, you meet somebody in person, as opposed to now, right now, like Bertrand was talking about, like, you have a funnel, but like everybody's meeting everybody over Zoom these days. And right, the moment you get in front of somebody and talk to them and meet them and know them, and maybe to Denise's kind of point earlier, is like, her investors know, the company, they know the people, they understand kind of what the investment is a little bit more, and so they can have conviction to make that call. But I think about our investors and the people that have come in our round, and it was relationships built over time and in person, and I think the conviction comes from that in terms of an investment, much more though so than, say, like in 2020, 2021, where cash is like flowing out of the door, and you just needed to make sure that the company was a real company, and that, like, it was a good bet to a certain degree. I think it's much more different today. I think it's a bit of more of an old school approach in a new age realm, where, like, the shaking the hands of people. One of our first investors I met at a Patriots Buffalo Bills game. The right team didn't win that day, but we ended up becoming friends, and that relationship ended up panning out in terms of a business relationship too. So you can't really script that, and maybe that's the hardest part about fundraising right now. But they're still out there, and I think the macroeconomics of today is just building that starts to take away some of those doubts of investors, and so relationship building is still super important today.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm sure people who were used to fundraising, say 3, 4, or 5 years ago, might find that frustrating. But I think for those of us who have raised prior to that, that seems a little more normal. And like you said, maybe in an updated way with Zoom and forums like that.
Yeah, it's tough when the expectation is Zoom today, and but the deals are being done because of other reasons. So, like, there will be, I'm sure, like some crash together in alignment at some point, but I think it's yet to happen, really.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Maybe with the next question, I'll continue right along similar lines and turn it over to you, Denise. How important were commitments to milestones? So then this is into the theme of building confidence and building that relationship. So commitments, so milestones like regulatory, clinical, technical, or anything else to build up trust or credibility with investors. How important was that for you?
Yeah, I think that's becoming more and more important. It's a little bit a question of the chicken and the egg, right? You kind of need the funding to meet your milestones, and they want to see the milestones come. So I would say it's almost like providing a lot of clarity on what do you plan to do with the funds, right? And this is where it's going to take us, and this is how we're planning on doing it, and then just keeping them updated on the progress towards those milestones. I think when times are more uncertain, where people are being more careful with their investment, they're trusting you with their money. So that trust factor is super important, but they also want to make sure that they're trusting what that money is going to be used for. We have had some tranched investments based on milestones, but I've tried to manage those to not make them like black or white or so tight that it becomes almost unmanageable, because you need to have that flexibility. Things happen. The FDA is unpredictable. There's a lot of change going there as well, right? Market conditions change, and you need to have that flexibility. But I think being very clear at least has helped me in gaining that trust from investors. And then every time we meet a milestone, communicate with them and say, okay, we said we're going to do this. This is the update. Here's what's working. And that just helps building that trust.
Excellent. And Bertrand, I see you nodding your head as well. Did you have similar experiences building the commitments or building the credibility through commitments of different types?
Yeah, absolutely. Not we didn't have trench money, that we had to meet the milestone to get the next round. But we, of course, the one thing is the milestone. I think that they shouldn't be micromanaged, like Denis said. You like they have to be within a quarter if you can do it. You cannot say it's going to be the 18th of September, and if it's the 19th, you're dead. That's absurd in our line of work. But at the same time, I think investors also they want to see that you move forward fast and that you keep your milestone. But also they want to see how you react when there is a problem, because there will be problem, and instead of hiding it and say, oh, we are missing 1 month, what should we do, blah blah. I think it's interesting to show exactly what you did, and why, and think that builds confidence also. That's part of what Ryan was saying. You need to feel the person in front of you, not just the face over the screen, and that's part of it. And for us, and for us in MedTech, I think with moonshot projects that will take long, that will have hurdles, where troubles will happen, the way we react when they do is really important, and that has to come out also to create this trust. If you keep it outside the rug and don't speak about it, that's not going to create trust. Nobody's going to believe that you never run into trouble and that you won't. But how you deal with it is what matters most, I think.
Great, thank you. And Ryan, what about for you? The milestones and building that
Yeah, no,
the
I
credibility.
don't have too much. Yeah, I don't have too much to add in terms of what's already been said. I think, in terms, one of the things that we've seen it help really well with is past investors coming back in and just updating them on the milestones that we've talked about and kind of what the next steps are. Just keeping them informed and showing that, yeah, like when hurdles come up, this is why we're going this direction instead of that direction now. We thought it was going to be this, because everybody knows we start with this big target, and it's really our job to navigate our way through that, but it's never linear in the raise, but it's never linear in building as well. So just keeping everybody apprised of that. And then we've seen a lot of new investors come, and over, knowing them over a year and a half for when they come to the next round, we've now informed them of all, they knew where we were, and now they see how we grow, and it wasn't 0 to 1, and they can kind of then make a call based on how we've progressed through those different hurdles and things like that. So I think it not only pays dividends with current investors, but future investors as well. So
yeah, makes sense. And Ryan, for you, how did you prioritize which investors to talk to, and which one to spend the time with, and how did you get their attention? I think a very noisy environment today.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So, I mean, there's like anything, I think I'm an engineer by trade. So there's a lot of research that goes into what I do up front. And, we built out lists based on, who had invested in our space before, what had they invested in, why, what stage, how much money, were they the first did they lead? Were they the first investors in, and those sorts of things. And we built out a list. And then we were, like any good startup, flexible in terms of then next steps. We learned from each interaction. 10 Series A investors, okay, that's way too far, but now we know the milestones that we have to hit for them. 10 seed, VCs, and kind of just continue to work our way through and try to understand where they're coming from. But we were pretty ruthless in terms of who we wanted to talk to first, and try to understand that where they're coming from, so that we can understand how to then message, I think, going forward. But it was fairly interesting. We ended up shifting early, so individual angels and angel groups and or pre-seed VCs, because that was what was aligning with the milestones that we had coming forward, and to Denise's point, the check size that we were asking for. And started to do, because of the macroeconomics, is we ended up doing a rolling close, right? So we ended up, kind of getting burned by the macroeconomics of it. When we came to close, people had been affected by X, Y, and Z, and so we were investing less, right? And so then we shifted and we just said, you know what, like we're gonna manage this ourselves. We're gonna rolling close this, and it worked really well. I think it worked really well for the investors. They got to get in early and see the progress, and it worked really well for us. And so yeah, I think that's how we ended up doing it. I think probably 3 years from now it won't work that way. 4 years ago it wouldn't have worked that way, but I think that's
And do you mean that,
kind of what we
Ryan,
took away.
won't work that way for your company or in general?
Maybe both. I mean, I think the important part about fundraising is to have a plan and then to be flexible. Like, I mean, maybe have 3 plans, right? Like you go out and you have ideally this is how this works. I mean, even Bertrand, said it, and Denise said it as well. Like you have all these, ideally this is how it will work out. I'll close in 2 weeks. I'll get General Catalyst on. They'll take like the trial, like that's how it's going to go. And being flexible and reacting to kind of what the market is telling you, like anything else, allows you to then to be in a good position to raise the rest of your funds the way that the market is telling you need to raise them. But the market's going to be totally different in a few years, and so the rolling close thing might not be there. We may, this company picked up and placed 3 years later might be raising from large VCs,
Right.
a lot more money, right? Like, and pushing forward. So I think it's just reading the tea leaves in terms of the market and then being able to react to it.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, it is interesting how it does constantly shift and change, and the ability to adapt and change with that is important. And Bertrand, how did you, for your investors, for Robote, how did you prioritize who to talk to, and how did you get their attention?
There were phases. The first phase was really research, so it was business angels, and we find an amazing community that supported us even in the hard time later, because there were a hard time later. But the VCs and the seed and the Series A VC, I think that the learning that we had is that initially we were going for purely MedTech VCs, and we found out that that was not the best way to do it. So we do have purely MedTech VCs, but we balance that with deep tech VCs, because what we're doing microbot, the story is somewhat easy to explain, more than if we're doing biotech, pure biotech, for instance.
Sure.
And therefore that's appealing also to deep tech, and so they usually have larger funds. The discussions are a bit faster than pure medtech. So we have pure medtech, we have corporate VCs in medtech also, and we have deep tech VCs, and the biggest fun with that. So I think it's really experience and trials and error makes you find your target more easily, or it's not easy anyway, but it's much better targeted than when you expect initially. And for us, it was that.
Yeah, great. And just a couple more questions before I start to open it up with some more general questions to all of you and to the Q&A. And Bertrand, once you targeted those certain investors, and you at some point you're starting to gain momentum, and maybe with a few, how did you maintain the momentum with them? And how were you able to convert that into the actual final financial commitment?
You can't sustain the momentum. So what that means, for maybe I'm generalizing, but I think that you can sustain a relationship, but not the momentum. So when you have VC that want to invest, but they don't want to be lead, and they're expecting for a lead, what my experience is, if it's too long, and then you find the lead, they're not going to come as follow, because their interest has shifted. They're still interested in knowing more about you, but in somewhere you've missed the boat, they've missed the boat. So from the lead, we have to recreate the lineup basically of follow investors or co-leads, and we did it really well. That was amazing. That went really fast. But I think that the momentum is momentum. If you don't do something with it, or because you can't, it's going to be lost and you're going to have to rebuild it, but it's possible to rebuild it. The one thing that was extremely slow and there was barely any momentum, it was really like we were surprised, was a corporate VC. You know, they don't have the same timing as VCs sometimes. And so you can prepare for long discussions and due diligence. But in the end, we got through and we got them, and we're really happy with that. But there was a different time zone, you know, like different world in terms of that momentum.
Yeah, and would you say so? On the corporate side, it was a much longer time frame.
Yeah, the corporate time frame. I mean, maybe there are exceptions, but the corporate time frame is much longer.
Yeah.
It's not in the same category as VCs.
And Bertrand, from your side, I'm interested, did you find differences in your investors between Europe and the US? And maybe you also looked elsewhere geographically. I don't know.
I you know what I found very different is generational, the generation, the mindset of VCs, not so much across continents, you know, and so it's generational, but it doesn't have to do with the age, you know, it's really the mindset. I saw a huge difference between old school VCs who use reason to an extreme that's unreasonable, you know, they want to excel you to death, and you can't create a new category with an Excel based on old information from existing company, from existing category. So these were what I would call the old school mindset, and that didn't work very well for us and for them. And the new mindset is really balancing really the Excel, so the reason with intuition, you know, with what you gather through meeting the people, discussing with them, etc. And this is very reasonable when it comes to doing something new that is not going to fit into a you know, a standard Excel basically.
Yeah,
So
interesting.
it's more generational than transatlantic or across continent. I found out.
Great. Denise, you look like you were going to say something. I'm curious if this resonates with you, again, being at a
Yeah.
very different state in your company.
So when you brought up the different geographies, that's something that actually helped us a lot, right? I 100% agree the VCs in the US are being slower and probably a little bit more careful, right? And again, the company had already talked in the past with a lot of them. So we did take the approach of looking outside. And when you look into Asia, when you look into the Middle East, when you look into these other regions, there is an appetite for investment. There is an appetite for innovation. And then you have to adjust your story a little bit because they also want to see, okay, what's your plan to come into Asia, right? And we actually accelerated some of our plans to try to find a way to expand geographically or globally on both ends, on the commercial end, so we can also get the investment end. And I have found those conversations to be actually very refreshing because they are at a different stage to where the US is right now. So there is an appetite for investment. Yeah.
Right. And I have to ask for all of you, as someone who's based in Boston but loves to travel to California and the West Coast, did you see coastal differences in investors?
I'll say the only coastal difference that I saw, and maybe this is MedTech, this might be a MedTech thing, is since we were raising from you know, angels and angel groups and smaller VCs, like we raised on a convertible note. Honestly, I don't know that the safe mechanism has made it to MedTech in Boston yet. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, either way, you know, but that was the one thing where, you know, I had investors not even know what a safe was yet. So we just went with a traditional convertible note, and that satisfied everybody. But I think that was for us, maybe the only difference. I will say though that we have a lot of investors from the Midwest, and maybe this is just echoes kind of what Denise was talking about. You know,
yeah.
the investors in San Fran, San Diego, LA, Boston, you know, they get flooded with MedTech deals constantly. Like we were one of a few groups that like went to the Midwest, and you know, they just weren't seeing the same volume, right? And so there was a lot more excitement, I think, from just like seeing something so innovative in that space, and we have ties to those areas. So that was a nice way in and things like that. But maybe those were just a few of the differences that we noticed from our specific set of investors.
Yeah, sure. In the Midwest, I mean, you have great MedTech innovation, of course, coming out of Minnesota, Chicago, Michigan, Indianapolis, so all over for sure.
Yeah, we have investors in the West Coast, investors in the East Coast, and in the Midwest. It wasn't a big differentiator for us. But yeah, it was just an equity investment, right? So probably a little bit more straightforward. Where we did find differences is just in the size of the company, right? We have a very large VC, Arch Venture Partners, who is our lead investor, and we have family offices. So even the amount of like the legal review of the document, you're talking to complete different spectrums, right? So we did find differences on that front.
Great. Okay, good. Thank you for that. Okay, let me just open it up a little more and just say, so for all of you, I'll let whoever wants to answer and go first to jump in. So looking back, what would you do differently if you had a chance to do it differently?
Maybe I can start. I think some of the learnings and things that I adjusted along the way was what's the focus, right? At the beginning, I was talking about the commercial rollout, but I was talking about going after new indications, and I was talking about doing clinical studies for these new indications and the potential of the device. And I think it overwhelmed some of the investors. It was like, okay, that's too much, right? And you're restructuring the team and you want to do everything. So I kind of changed my story based on who I was talking to. If it was an investor that's really more attracted to the commercial aspect, the whole conversation and the whole pitch deck was about commercial growth. And there were a couple that I know like more of that, or maybe they were in a different space and they could feel attracted to some of the indications we are thinking about. Then I would expand a little bit. It's like, well, and this is our pipeline for new indications. But I think just really knowing what's important to your investor and sticking to that. If you give them too much information, it just overwhelms them and becomes difficult to follow. So probably that's what I would do different.
Yeah, I would go along the slightly different, but along the same lines in terms of like the story you tell and not overwhelming, especially for us at the beginning. We want to see amazing investors a bit too early. And so, they see you again and again and again, and you become a fixture, So then when you come back with something completely new, they know too much. They believe they know too much about you, and you're not fresh and new as you could have been if you had delayed that. But it's a two-edged sword in the sense that talking to top investor at the beginning, even if that wears out the relationship a bit, it makes you practice and know what it takes for them to be successful. And there, when you meet others, that have a fresh view on you, you're more, you know more about it and you have more skills. So I think that with the top-notch investors that you're going to want to see later, some of them, you should use them as a sparring partner in a way, and others you should keep for when you're ready to do it. That would be the things that I change. For the rest, you hurdles, troubles, difficulties, you have to go through them. I don't see any way of completely avoiding that,
Yeah, so Bertrand, it sounds like you saw it somewhat as a learning experience. So as you started talking and learned from the conversations and started to refine your pitch.
Exactly.
And
you have to somewhere you may have to sacrifice a few potential investments for the learning that you get from the relationship.
Yeah. How did you know, looking back, how would you know when the right time would be? It sounds like your recommendation there is to choose maybe some investors are more comfortable with very early stage, not quite fully formed ideas and concepts. Is that fair to say? And before you go to the ones that are expecting, maybe have higher expectations in terms of being more buttoned up and ready. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's a difficult question, like when is the right time? I think that it's never when you think it's never when you're gonna have all the data, because if it's then you're dead before you get all the data. As Denise said, it's a chicken and egg, like she said that about the milestones, but it's the same with the data. You need investment to get the data, and you need data to get the investment, but you need the investment first in a way, So you're gonna have a lot of data. You're gonna have amazing data, enough data, but in your mind, it's never gonna feel like it's enough and beforehand. So I think that's but I think at some point you see a tipping point in the perception of the community in a way, not just investors, but conference you may go to, peers, and you see the press, the media, it can be different things. And you see that it's shifting because you've proven enough that there is a momentum that builds up. And there it's when it's a phase, it can be a long phase, but it's when it happens, I feel. But you can't predict it. You're going to feel it, and hope that it matches to the period when you're fundraising, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
And Ryan,
just
what
that,
about you? What would you do differently?
yeah, I'll just add up, I think, both points in terms of like some of the data that you need in the fundraising process comes from the fundraising process itself. Like in terms like when to go raise the funds, obviously has to do with the stage of your business, but it also has to do with the appetite of the investors for the stage of your business and the messages from what you're trying to deliver, right? So part of it is going out and actually talking to investors, and hopefully you can try to do that in like a safe space where like you don't need this investor, or somebody that's an investor, and you can get some of that feedback of why what's not hitting, what's not landing. Like we revised our message quite a bit, right? Because the who we were targeting ended up shifting quite a bit. And so we were coming at it from a very tactical perspective of like, this is what we have to accomplish to get to the FDA. Like, you guys will totally understand this market, to like almost throttling it all the way back and being like, look, we're inventing a completely new market segment. Like, we're inventing a blood pressure cuff where there wasn't one before, right? It's the spaces that this can go into are ridiculous. And then even further beyond that is almost bringing something that's familiar to people and a story to it to try to personify it, right? And so there's no way that we could have learned that or felt like we were prepared enough to like go fundraise without actually going into the process a bit and trying to hone that message. And so I do think a part of it is getting 80-90% of the way there and feeling comfortable with where the business is, what you need to fundraise, that you've looked forward and you can answer questions enough. And then you just kind of have to go do it. And if you get the same question from 4 different people, either you're going to have to answer that every time, or you should put that in your pitch, right? Like, so part of it is just feeling like you're almost there. And that's probably like the time to start going and soft pitching and getting feedback. Because I don't know how else you could do it. So even with past investors, like I would never it would be hard for me to go pitch for follow-on investment if I didn't have all those ducks in a row. Like you have to get somewhat 80% of the way there. And this is coming from an engineer, by the way. Like I want everything 110% done, which is not possible. So I've had to kind of overcome that hurdle in myself is to get 80% of the way there and then learn through the process itself. So I'll just maybe that ties Denise and Bertrand's kind of message together, but that's something I think we learned fairly well. And I don't know how to do that better next time. Like, I think that's still going to be, maybe I could plan it into the process a little bit more, but I think it's an important part of it.
Yeah, I think it's probably different with depending on your technology, depending on state, depending on variables. But, I really appreciate that. So here engineers, and so for engineers, the whole chicken egg thing is not a comfortable place sometimes to engage in, right? To be very challenging. So what I'll maybe do is, so we do have questions coming up. Maybe I'll open it up to some Q&A. And so we do have, looks like maybe a couple questions, at least one in particular. So someone wrote in a 3-part for Ryan and Bertrand. How important do you feel it is to have a physician on board as a partner from day one? What stage did you bring a physician into your team? And looking back, do you think having that clinical perspective earlier, my scroll isn't very good, helped, let's say?
I
Either
can
of you.
start.
Yeah.
We're doing neurosurgery, so I'm a roboticist. I'm an engineer also, like Ryan. So I suffer the same issues, and readiness and double guessing when you'll be ready. But in terms of that, there's no way we could have done it without the support of neurosurgeons very early on. And we got a neurosurgeon aboard just before employee number one. So he's a shareholder, although he's not a large shareholder in the company, but he's a significant one. He's still with us. He's still, like going full blast after all these years. And he was there just after we started the company, or just after we got the idea of starting the company, before employee number one. So very early on, but because he's not a huge shareholder, it was also easier, I think, to embark older KOLs, older neurosurgeons in the adventure. And we did that very early on. After 1 year, we toured the US and got several KOLs that are still with us, all of them. Some of them became investors also in the company. So I think it's extremely important, but I don't think it's necessary to have them necessarily as a founding, member of the team. They can be a very early addition to the team also.
Yeah, and I think it probably depends on where you're coming from. I know a lot of physician founded, companies, and I think it benefits them quite a bit. They'll get questions on the other end. Like, you guys are physicians and you're still practicing, and who's actually going to make this and who's going to run the business. So I think from our perspective, where, we were engineers and operators and things of that nature, we ended up, my co-founder and I love customer discovery. We went out and interviewed over 100 just to start the company, right? So we interviewed everybody across the spectrum to try to understand the pain point of where they're coming from. And that ended up yielding a lot of long-term relationships that we can go and either refer investors to, or get quotes from, or pick their brains on, right? And so I think for us, at the bare minimum, at that early stage, having that was really important to us. I think just from operating the business, quite frankly, right? Understanding even where we're going from was really important. We had an assumption that we were supposed to go into this one space, like our tool is called the holy grail of neurosurgery, right? And so we're like, oh, well, that's where we should go. And what ended up happening is we found a very different pain point that was much easier to target, has reimbursement codes, like it fit really well into this space, and we kind of redirected it right there, right? So without physicians, without our customers, we would have never figured that out. Going forward, we're going to raise our Series A, and we've identified the fact that now we need an MO, right? We need, I think, to raise our next round, we've identified that is a gap in what we want to do, so that they're on calls, they're standing up. We have a cadre of KOLs that will talk about us and do research with us and all of that sort of stuff. But I think, looking forward as opposed to looking back, it is something we're going to build in longer term to grow, and they can manage different things that, honestly, that Chris and I, just my co-founder, and I can't speak to. We don't have that education. So I think it's important to some level. I don't know that you have to go out and run to get somebody on board, but you need their perspective in what you're doing regardless.
Yeah.
And Brian,
Sorry. Trellis has a history with physicians, an important part of your development. So it'd be good to hear from you.
Right. And I was going to give a little bit of a different perspective. I 100% agree with Ryan. Your KOLs, your physicians are the ones that even later on are going to help you spearhead that technology, right? They're the ones that are going to get other people excited, and they are the ones that are really going to support the company. At least in our field, they're very used to investing in early stage companies. So they're also a great source of funding for pre-seed money or angel investments. The only word of caution that I wanted to add is, especially in later stages, I'm a bit skeptical about having one physician on your board, or let's say two physicians on your board, because then if the rest of your board are investors or have a different commercial perspective or from a different background, that kind of becomes the source of truth, and everybody looks at them. And we need to remember that that's the voice of one, right? When you start scaling, each physician will do things differently, and what that person believes is the right way may be completely different from what your top customer thinks is the right way. So I've shied away from that and moved more to having clinical advisory boards where it's a mix of physicians that can give you feedback, and they can come and be part of your board meeting at some point, or can give a report for your board meeting. But then we're having a more diversified view than just the voice of like one physician founder or one KOL. So that's my 5 cents.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, we have another question came in. I'll open up to whoever wants to respond. How did you protect your ideas in the early stages of gaining market insights with A's, provisional patents? And then there's a follow-up question to that. And how did you find space to begin work on ideas?
I could try. Ours is fairly. So we actually built a lot of this under grants, and so had provisional and even we had granted patents at the point where we actually started up. And so ours is a little bit different. We still hold a lot of it close to chest. The majority of our stuff is our secret sauce is built on algorithm, and we've protected the rest through method patents, things of that nature. And so didn't feel as worried about NDAs at that point. But once we went to more manufacturer or design house and manufacturing, we got NDAs in place for a lot of those things, just because know-how was about to be shared. So, and then lab space, I'm at Mass Challenge right now in a lab space that is free. So shout out to Mass Challenge. They were the first accelerator that we went through after we started up. They're amazing. They don't have let's say wet lab space or anything of that nature, but we didn't need it. So that was, we found it a little bit more easy to navigate, and actually just signed our first lease now to move into a manufacturing space up in Burlington, which was through Northeastern, and is because I'm a Northeastern, go Huskies. And ended up, they have a great program for folks that it's less money. It's about, I think, $1,200 a month, which is insane, but it's all we need at this point. So, we stayed virtual for as long as we could, and now we can't. So I think that was a benefit for us. But there are programs out there where you can get small lab spaces, wet lab spaces, and so we were just very intent on only getting what we needed at the time, because that is a good portion of your early stage burn rate. So
right. Anyone else?
As for us, it's of course it's patents, it's a contract that you have, including with trainees, but I think you need a little bit of paranoid mindset once in a while, and it's necessary. That you're going too far, but it's better than nothing, and that helps,
Yeah.
And I think that I would just add that what's important is know what you can share and what you can't, but make sure your team knows it very well too. And you set those boundaries, right? And that's when your trade secrets start becoming important. In a previous company, we did major exercise to try to map out what was even a trade secret, because at the beginning, nobody thinks about it. And so you have to go through that exercise and make sure your team knows, hey, this is very confidential information. This is critical to our mode of action. We may not patent it because we don't want our competitors to know about it, and just start setting those boundaries very, very early on.
Yeah, I just want to add a little, we also, during the diligence process, all of our meetings with the FDA, certain things that we didn't that I'm not going to get up and pitch about, but we didn't end up putting just carte blanche into the data room and things of that. We held certain things back that took us a lot of capital, a lot of time. So to Denise's point, should that get out for whatever reason, right? would make somebody else's life a bit easier, right? So we just wanted to make sure that we're putting as many barriers to people trying to do what we do, even though we have IP in the space. Like that's not it, right? So and to Bertrand's point about being a little paranoid, right? So it's okay to be a little paranoid, but just know those lines. You can overshare sometimes, but I think as long as your entire organization knows, that's probably the most important part. You don't want somebody thinking something is okay that isn't. So
Very good.
And I will add that I have also seen a shift from investors regarding IP and how they value that. I think at some point it was extremely important, and we would all used to put on our pitch decks, I have these many patents, right? And I think now they're less concerned about how many patents do you have, but how are you securing your path to market, right? So I think just having that cohesive view and being able to pitch that to investors and say, this is why we're unique, this is why we're protected, and this is how we're going to protect it to go to market is more important than just saying, oh, we filed 10 patents. Or it's really hard, right? A patent infringement lawsuit takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of resources. So even if you have the patents, are you going to litigate them, right? And so I think they're more worried about that moat that you can put based on all these other parameters that you can do.
Yeah, very good. We're almost at time. I do a final lightning round question for everyone before we close out. But I'll let whoever wants first. One piece of advice for a new entrepreneur who's embarking on the fundraising process today, what would you tell them?
all right, I'll go first. It's a humbling process. I'll say that. It always will be. There's like, you're putting your baby out there. You're going to get feedback. You're going to get way more no's. And I'm sure you're going to hear this across like anytime you talk about investing at all. But just realize that you're the opportunity, right? This is your vision. Don't compromise the vision of what you're building. Learn things along the way, but realize that you're giving them their opportunity to invest. You're giving this isn't just like they get another CranioSense, like there's CranioSense 2 over there and they go get to invest in that, right? This is their opportunity to invest in you, and try to keep your head up as much as possible throughout the process. Like I said, I'm a big feedback loop guy, learn, incorporate it, but just know that this is you're the opportunity, not the other way around, right? That's hard to keep in the front of your brain when you're asking them for money and they're saying yes or no. Think of it as the other way, you're saying yes to them and taking, their money to further your vision. So that's very difficult to do. But if I could incorporate that advice in myself somehow all the time, then I think I'd be in a better place throughout the process. So
I can go next. I would say I agree 100% with Ryan. You're gonna get 100 no's and maybe one yes, and your baby's gonna be called ugly, and you have to be okay with that. My one piece of advice would be you will hear a lot of feedback. And I get it even from board members and from existing investors. Oh, you should do this. You should do that. Why don't you change this? Why don't you change that? Don't just go running and try to do everything that they tell you. Know what you're trying to do. Be able to get all that information, process it. There may be things that are worth pursuing, but don't feel like you need to please everybody and try to adjust your story, your pitch, your product to please everybody, because you're going to end up in a spot where you're not going to please anybody. So keep pushing until you find the people that align with what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Ryan and Denise said, and what you just finished with, Denise. Go with the people, go along with you. I think it's the most important. I think that when people seem half interested, they're not interested. You know, when they ask for too many data, what's your sales projection in 10 years, blah, blah, blah. What's going to be the name of your great grandchildren when you don't have any children to start with, etc. They're not interested. It's a way to say no in a way, you know. And so don't chase these and try to create a presentation, data, and an offering, and a company where you will find one at least or a few that are going to be really interested, and you're going to feel it, and then you're going to have discussions, you know, of course, but it's not the same traction than when somebody's really interested and is going to be with you and help you, than when you have to beg, you know, for attention and for feedback. So I think really to be a bit tough and discard those who seem half interested because they're not interested is the best way to go, and go to those who are interested. And when when nobody is interested yet, you know, continue, perfect your messages, perfect your data, go along, and you'll find them and they'll find you.
Very good. Okay, I think we're out of time. I'd like to thank you. And in closing address, I do see a full question. One on availability of the webinar. So Dale, I'll let you cover that as we was here, if you don't mind. And the other one is reaching out to any of the panelists. For the audience, I'll remind you that all the panelists volunteer emails. You can see that in the post next to their name. So you feel free to up and to with any questions yet following up.
Absolutely. I would just want to say thank you to our fantastic panel for such an insightful webinar. Brian, Denise, Ryan, Bertrand, this was fantastic and very helpful for everyone. I just want to remind the registrants and everyone that is attending today that the presentation, as well as any other follow-up materials, will be sent out to everyone at the start of next week. And I encourage you in the meantime, if you have any questions for anybody, please reach out, as Brian had said, to the emails that are in everyone's display names. Outside of that, really appreciate Sunrise Labs, Centralis, Robots, from CranioSense, and we'd absolutely look forward to performing any future webinars.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank
And
you,
take
guys.
care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take
Bye.
care.